you see. I look at you and tell you what I feel. Look at me and tell me what you see. I look at you and tell you what I feel.
Welcome back. Got something a little different for the channel today, a western film called Young Guns, and another Patreon request. Now, being British, I was never really taught anything about western history, so doing research for this video revealed some pretty interesting facts, specifically about the Lincoln County War, which this movie takes place in. Also, I'm not going to go into every single historical inaccuracy for this video, mainly because we'd be here all day. So let's get to it. The film begins, oddly, with a brief introduction to our principal characters, or rather the actors playing them. We have Emilio Estevez as Billy the Kid, better known as that guy from the Mighty Ducks. Kiefer Sutherland as Punished Venom Snake. Lou Diamond Phillips, who's not done much of note, unless you count Stargate Universe, and I don't think many people would. And of course, the man to somehow turn this opening into one big joke, human punchline, Charlie Sheen. All joking aside, it's an unusual cast choice. Now granted, I'm not the best judge when it comes to western films, but usually you see grizzled, tough actors like Eastwood. And it's not really a good or bad thing, it's just something to make the film stand out. It's a positive start. And I'm sure these guys can take my jokes with good humour. Okay, maybe not. The film begins proper with John Tunstall and Doc in town negotiating over the purchase of whiskey, making Tunstall into a father figure. But the pleasant mood is cut short as gunfire is heard and someone is seen running from other gun wielders. And while hiding, he gets approached by Tunstall with Doc pointing a gun at him, letting him come with them to Tunstall's own ranch. It's fairly accurate historically since Billy the Kid did work on John Tunstall's ranch as part of his Regulators, although they weren't called that until after Tunstall died, but I'm going to call them that for simplicity's sake. Also, except for a single mention later, the fact that Billy was on the run presumably for committing a crime isn't really explored in any great detail. As a historical period piece, you'd think it'd get some kind of explanation. At the ranch, one of the Regulators, Chavez, is getting what seems to be the usual barrage of racist insults from the tobacco chewer. But they're soon broken up by Charlie Sheen, who's definitely the most level-headed of the group. I know, how unexpected is that? Billy is allowed to stay with the others, giving him the job of feeding the pigs, which he is hilariously incapable at. And Charlie, one of the Regulators, not Charlie Sheen, delights in tormenting him about it, wondering what he did to end up there, making Billy hint at the fact that he may have killed someone to be on the run like he was. In reality, Billy the Kid, known as Henry McCarthy at the time, killed a Francisca Hill during a verbal argument. The witnesses to the event all considered it self-defense, but he was still taken into custody, where he eventually managed to escape. Now, the reason why I think his backstory needed more detail is because he had many other crimes under his belt, including, but not limited to, petty theft and cattle rustling. Essentially a career criminal, which I think would have informed his character more and made him more than just the misunderstood anti-hero you see here. That evening, the group and Tunstall sit down for a meal together, with the others continuing to make fun of Billy. Tunstall continues to act the father figure, punishing the two with washing up, for, as they put it, hacking on Billy. It leads to a pretty fun moment when Billy is asked why he killed someone.
Yeah, Billy, what you kill him for?
He was hacking on me.
It's a nice moment to inform us of Billy's nature. Also, the whole father-figure relationship with Tunstall and the Regulators is pretty typical of these kinds of films, yet also pretty inaccurate, because that's not the relationship he had with the Regulators. Apart from Billy, Tunstall was actually younger than most of them at 24. Doc was 31, and Charlie Sheen's character Brewer was 27. I understand why they did it, It's so that the bond between the Regulators and Tunstall could be easily conveyed to the audience. But it really doesn't give credit to how diverse and complicated the relationship and friendship these men had for each other was. The next day, while Billy continues to fail with the pigs, a meeting that looks close to being a Mexican standoff occurs with Tunstall and his Regulators against rival rancher Murphy and his guards. Murphy and the sheriff have arrived to complain about his goods being stolen, but Tunstall knows he's using any excuse to get his rival out of the picture. It's also pretty clear who the bad guy is here, cause he's wearing a black hat. Classic Western movie rules. And yeah, the good guys have black ones too, but Murphy's just looks like an evil hat to me. Later, someone new shows up at the ranch, McCloskey, who's one of Murphy's men, but at least claims to have been fired by him. So Tunstall lets him stay. He'll be more important later. In town, Tunstall has gotten Billy new clothes, also a distinctive crossways holster for his revolvers, showing off a bit to his own reflection, emphasising he's a dab hand with the pistols, although the kid's preferred weapon of choice was his Winchester rifle. He also makes an impression on the other Regulators with his pistols. I know it's the Wild West and all, but Billy shooting wildly and cackling like a hyena would certainly give me pause to think maybe he's a little unstable. And that instability will be shown quite frequently throughout the film, which all goes towards his anti-hero status. It's New Year's Eve and celebrations are taking place for the town. Both Tunstall and Murphy factions are there, and Tunstall begins negotiations with his lawyer and friend, Alex, to get the governor to stop Murphy and his harassment activities. But since the governor's already in Murphy's back pocket, it's doubtful that's gonna happen. The film makes a cut-and-dry case for Tunstall being the good guy and Murphy being the villain of the piece, whereas in reality, Tunstall was just as much of a cutthroat snake-in-the-grass character, who genuinely was trying to muscle in on other business territory and take everything for himself. So let's not kid ourselves here. The movie might think otherwise, but there were no noble types in this situation. Meanwhile, at the party, Doc notices an Asian woman in the crowd. He asks Murphy for and gets permission to dance with her. Now, firstly forgetting that Doc in reality was a happily married man, this is the most blatant, this film must have a love interest crap ever. The fact Murphy allows Doc to dance, but then forbids speaking to the woman, claiming he didn't recognise him, all adds to the big ball of antagonism that is Murphy in a pretty ridiculously convoluted and not really subtle way. And the evening's entertainment moves to a close as everyone celebrates the new year.
Happy New Year!
Also, on an unrelated note, there was a huge upsurge in mysterious deaths caused by unexplained bullet wounds in the next town over. It was the damnedest thing, nobody could explain what happened. In the morning, Tunstall and the Regulators make their way back to the ranch, with them getting suddenly distracted by a flock of pheasants, determined to catch some. I don't blame them, honestly. Mainly because finding pheasant in Mexico at this time is just as remarkable as finding a herd of buffalo in central London. But regardless, while the rest of the men chase the miracle pheasant, Tunstall is left alone when suddenly Murphy and his men appear from behind to gun him down in cold blood, which is fairly accurate to reality, apart from a few minor details like Tunstall being killed on the 18th of February, not the 1st of January. The Regulators are forced to run from the posse, and once they've escaped, they hold a small ceremony for Tunstall in town. Alex attempts to seek justice from the governor, considering how the mayor is with Murphy on this. Alex persuades the governor to deputize the Regulators so that they might bring the killers in. I refer you back to Billy's clear instability as an indicator of how well this will go. So the Regulators have their first arrest to make, Henry Hill, at a nearby dive, with Brewer insisting on making sure they take him alive. So obviously, the best course of action is to send in Billy the fucking Kid in there. Is there an Old West term for bonehead? To further hammer home the stupid choice, Billy ambushes Hill while he's taking a piss, shooting him as soon as looking at him, leading to a full-on shootout cum massacre that leaves several bar patrons dead, but luckily none of the Regulators, as they read about the attack in the newspaper while hiding out. While out of sight from those who would more than likely want to kill them, Doc takes this moment to talk to the woman from the party again, cause while in mid-hideout mode is the best time to try your luck. The woman refuses to talk to him, so Doc just tells her to threaten Murphy with the Regulators' wrath instead. It is pretty weird for Doc to pursue this love interest stuff right in the middle of his group's crusade for revenge, which again wouldn't be much of a problem if they just accurately depicted him with a wife. Also, the antagonism between Billy and Brewer over the leadership and direction of the Regulators start now, which again has no accuracy in reality, because Billy was never really interested in leadership and was content to be a follower. In the wilds later, the Regulators successfully ambush 2 more of Murphy's men, with Brewer wanting to arrest them, and Billy wanting to shoot them dead, with McCloskey urging sanity. So of course, Billy interprets this as a sign that McCloskey's secretly working for Murphy, leading the Regulators into an ambush. But Billy airs his disagreement rationally.
Sorry I didn't sniff you out soon, you goddamn traitor.
Leading to more people they're supposed to arrest being killed. I like that scene, mainly because even though Doc agreed with Billy that McCloskey was acting strange, the whole incident made Billy look like a kill-crazy paranoid psychopath, moving away from that initial nonsensical anti-hero portrayal. However, it won't really have much impact on his character, and he'll continue to be that anti-hero type from now on. Also, you'd be right in assuming that incident didn't really align with history much. But really, there are so many conflicting stories about the killing of those 3 men that it's hard to say, really. The Regulators are now deeper in hiding, as they rest in the hills, reading the news of a bounty hunter, Kinney, is out looking for them. And then there's the most irritating part of the film, as Chavez paints his face and gets them all to drink a brew of peyote, which gets them all tripping balls. Well, apart from Brewer, who doesn't take drugs. I know, Charlie Sheen the only one not to take drugs. But like I said, the film gets incredibly fucking irritating, as it stops stone dead as they wander about like complete idiots tripping balls for what feels like 10 goddamn minutes, with a stupid lowered pitch to their voices. The whole thing's annoying. Moving on.
That's real. That's real.
Godless heathens.
While sitting down to eat, Billy and Brewer continue to feud about leading the Regulators, when a man called Buckshot Roberts arrives, and with a name like that, it's doubtful he's a mailman. Outside, they greet the man, intent on arresting him, but he's there to cash in on the bounty for the Regulators. Shooting begins, with Chavez and Doc getting hit, and Roberts hiding in an outhouse. They fire into the building, believing Roberts dead, so Brewer checks. I'm sure a big gun sticking out of a building won't go unnoticed. And it's not like he's going to be able to shoot someone like that. You'd have to be a complete... So Brewer, as well as Roberts, is now dead, and the rest of the Regulators quickly scupper, under Billy's leadership. However, it was actually Doc who took over when Brewer was killed, in reality. Speaking of which, Doc has returned to town to pursue the Asian woman, sneaking into her room and convincing her he's trying to help free her from Murphy. This is all fine and dandy for a movie, but it's all simply unnecessary. So anyway, Doc meets back up with the rest of the Regulators, and Billy's itching for some more killing. This time the sheriff, Brady, as he proceeds to act like a jackass, dancing behind them and following the men until he throws his hat to make them stop, and starts another gunfight, leading to more dead men. And if it seems like the Regulators are constantly in trouble, the governor agrees, as Alex, with his fabulous hair, tells Billy and the others that they've had their deputy status revoked, and are now wanted by Murphy's men as well as the US Army. Billy admits he wanted to attract enough attention so people would see Murphy and his ilk's corruption of the region. Which again makes Billy the Kid into more of a Robin Hood figure rather than the kill-crazy outlaw he really was. The narrative is very much skewed in favour of the mythical Kid. Well, now no longer being deputized, the Regulators throw their badges down and make their way out of town, with one of them, Charlie, not particularly keen on hanging, so what's his next best solution? Why, visit a prostitute, of course, while the others sit around and drink. And in the bar, the stupidest bounty hunter in the West is bragging about how he's going to claim the bounty on Billy and the Regulators, like a twat. Frankly, he deserves everything that's coming to him, as Billy decides to fuck with the moron. First, Billy pretends to admire the guy and kiss his ass, which he obviously loves. And he hands over his hunter's pistol like a fucking moron when Billy asks for it, who rather cleverly removes the next round in the chamber before passing the gun back, so that when he reveals himself as Billy the Kid, wait, Billy clearly removed only one bullet. They deliberately made that obvious. Was the guy really stupid enough to only load a single round in the cylinder? I mean, I guess Billy could have removed the other bullets when the camera wasn't on him, but that just makes it needlessly confusing. The Regulators make a run for it as Kinney with Murphy's men show up, leading to an extended chase through the wilderness, managing to escape, and now it's time for the calm before the climactic storm, as the Regulators party in their Mexican hidey hole, because, randomly, Charlie has decided to get married. Which is not a flimsy attempt to give his character more emotional weight for the climax. I mean, we don't even know his wife at all. And come to think of it, neither does he. And the film wouldn't get extra cheap and tacky by having Charlie die in the climax either. No, everything I just said just doesn't happen. Meanwhile, Billy is on his own when none other than Pat Garrett appears to help Billy and the Regulators out. But of course, if you know anything about Pat Garrett, you'd know that he's the man who killed Billy the Kid. So his advice is clearly bollocks. Even without historical retrospect, his ruse is incredibly obvious, warning Billy that Alex is going to be killed by Murphy and his men, specifically telling him it would be good for the group to help Alex and his wife out of the country, in the exact "this is an ambush" tone of voice. So they saddle up and move on out. They pay lip service to Charlie staying behind for his wife, but nah, that's not how it's gonna go. So the Regulators soon show up at Alex's house, anxious to get him out of there, and that's when Murphy and his lot spring the trap. And Kinney appears too, and if that wasn't enough, the friggin' army will also march in as well, which is overkill for 5 guys. The massive amounts of overkill here is quite strange, because in reality, there were 15 Regulators and 30 to 40 Mexican allies holed up against Murphy. So if that was the case, then the amount of Murphy's men would make much more sense, and not make these 5 Regulators into some kind of unstoppable Rambos. It's not really the kind of tone you want for a historical film. This fight actually takes up the entirety of the film's final 20 minutes, so I'm going to speed things up to give you the cliff notes. And of course, a lot of bullets fly through the house, not really doing anything to anyone, just a whole lot of property damage. Eventually, everyone is forced to hold up on the second floor of the house, managing some kind of sleep. And in the morning, the army shows up, like I said, so things really aren't looking good. Murphy now makes his presence known, with his ward who runs for the house, and is met by Doc for another climactic, emotional moment. That's soured somewhat by more gunfire peppering the house. And then they set it alight, so the siege won't be lasting much longer. Alex's wife is allowed to leave the house, giving the colonel a piece of her mind, and that's when they realise Chavez has completely bugged out, leading to Billy performing this daring feat. Which, given by the way that trunk landed, I'm surprised he can shoot straight with all those broken bones and concussion. But let's get to the point, shall we? The Regulators start firing, managing to pick off a few men with the surprise attack. Fortunately, that's when Chavez returns with horses to help them leave. But not before everyone gets shot a few times, with Charlie and the other minor Regulator being shot and killed, as well as Alex getting the full brunt of a machine gun. Again, frickin' overkill. And then the final act of revenge from Billy.
Reap it, Murphy, you son of a bitch.
Then a short epilogue tells us what happened to the remaining Regulators as they went their separate ways. I have to admit, Billy making the shot that killed Murphy was pretty impressive, made even more so by the fact that in reality, Murphy was in Santa Fe dying of a terminal illness. I get that the film needed that final cathartic moment, but this is pretty ridiculous. But anyway, that was Young Guns. Like I said at the start, this was a strange film for me, because I had no context for the history and had to learn everything as I went along. But I am glad I did, as the history, the stories and the real people involved is an incredibly interesting thing to read. However, The film, on the other hand, takes ludicrous amounts of liberty with its source material, and there are many websites and articles detailing everything this film got wrong. But outside of the historical inaccuracies, the film is actually pretty decent and enjoyable to watch, with everyone giving a damn fine performance. Also, it's pretty interesting to see these incredibly well-known actors as their much younger selves, seeing where they came from. And the historical inaccuracies were so vast that Emilio Estevez tried to rectify this in the film's sequel, Young Guns 2, which, if you're interested, is what the Bon Jovi song Blaze of Glory was written for, and I might look at that film sometime later in the future. Once again, this video was brought to you with the help of Patreon and Jeffrey McConnell and his brothers specifically. If you wish to donate and support the show, help keep it running, and maybe make a request of your own, the link is in the description. Once again, thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.